It's the absolute best reporting and storytelling from Fox 32 Chicago. You gotta see it. Here's what you gotta see. Next, we take you to a secret spot where photographers have their eyes on the skies.
It's fun to follow them, though. You feel like you're flying with them.
Oh, it's a feisty one.
From the 4 stars to up in the rafters, meet Chicago's official flag maker.
We have Fort Dearborn, the Chicago Fire, the Columbian Exposition, and the Century of Progress.
You gotta see it.
When I want to take a break from the fast-paced world of TV news deadlines and get back to the fundamentals that sparked my interest in photography in the first place. I typically head north. Wisconsin is home to hundreds of river dams on the Mississippi, the Fox, and Wisconsin rivers. These dams provide nutrient-rich habitats for aquatic life and for all those who hunt for it. It's that unique combination that brings myself and my fellow photographers together, and for just a few hours to live in their world. America's symbol of freedom. The American bald eagle.
They're up there flying around. They're upside down and sideways, and wings are flapping everywhere, and you're going brrrr. And when you look afterwards, you go, wow, that was really cool.
They have such an intense and fierce look when they swoop down to grab a fish. And when you see them soaring up in the air, they just seem so majestic.
When you're out in the wild, like if you just stop and pay attention for a couple minutes, how much stuff is around you.
Heron right to the left, just sitting there.
I've always been into wildlife. I've always had a soft spot for animals and stuff like that. And then once I go out to the wildlife, I get to step into their world. It's like a whole new world.
He's coming into our right.
Which one do I go for?
Right? Oh man, look at you.
My grandfather was a big outdoorsman, did all sorts of hunting. One thing he said that really stuck with me is just being out in nature, being out in the woods, peace and the quiet. That's the real prize.
Those experiences where I'm out there and it's just me and the animal, and they don't seem bothered or spooked by me, and I know I'm being discreet and respectful of them, and it's just like you're on a different planet for a moment there.
Well, they tell more of a story.
Right.
He's not just coming at you, he's coming at you with something that he just caught. I love being out here. It's just the best, interacting with these majestic birds and watching them hunt and fish and interact with each other and do what they do. It doesn't get better. Sitting out in nature and watching it do what it does. It's fun to follow them, though. You feel like you're flying with them.
Oh, it's a feisty one.
I was a critical care paramedic for 14 years. So this was my therapy, away from work, try to forget all the things we see at work, then you just go out in nature. Just watching their size and how graceful they are as they glide through the sky, and then how quick they are and acrobatic when they decide to dive down and catch fish. It's just something else to actually witness, up close and personal.
Oh, here comes the baldy to our right. Right to the right, Joni. Right here. Did he get it? No, he's coming back around. Look left, look right, look left, look right. Now there's a bunch of them. Oh wow, look at them, here we go. Oh, we got one. Well, that was an awesome day, guys.
It was.
It doesn't get much better than that. That's pretty good right there.
For sure.
Chicago's Puerto Rican population isn't the largest Latino community in our city, but Puerto Ricans have definitely made their mark. They started migrating to this area in the 40s, and Humboldt Park on the northwest side became a hotspot. Drive along Division Street, you see murals, restaurants, and storefronts. Locals playing dominoes, all showcasing Puerto Rican pride.
They're always happy to give you a hug and greet you.
Chicago's Puerto Rican business community is situated between two landmarks in Humboldt Park, massive Puerto Rican steel flags that make up the area known as Paseo Boricua, or the Puerto Rican Promenade.
Before we put up those flags, 83% of the storefronts on Division Street were vacant.
The man who helped to bring those markers to this area is former Chicago Alderman Bill Ocasio.
Within 5 years of putting up the flags, 76% of the storefronts were full and owned by Puerto Ricans.
And it instantly became known as the Puerto Rican Business District.
I dedicated those flags that are made out of steel to our parents that came here to work in those pipeline factories, as did my father, and in the steel mills.
And this is home base for the annual Puerto Rican Parade and the many festivals that celebrate the culture.
This community needs something to be proud of. And we do it through our dance, we do it through our food, and through our dress as well.
Ocasio is also responsible for helping to bring and create the National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture.
A lot of different things that set this museum apart. We incorporate our history into other people's history, so we bring different people together.
It's the only museum of its kind outside of Puerto Rico.
Puerto Ricans are made up of 1/3 Taino Indian, 1/3 Spaniard, and 1/3 African. And so we celebrate all three of those cultures.
Oh, look at this, wow.
And you can't talk community without talking food. Things like arroz con gandules, lechon, mofongo. Nellie's is a neighborhood staple that's been around for 16 years.
Having a restaurant where the Puerto Ricans and other people in this community would feel proud of to come and be able to eat the everyday dishes that maybe they even make at home.
One of Nellie's exclusive recipes is the avena de coco, or coconut oatmeal, with the symbol of the island, the coqui, or a little frog that makes the sound that is indigenous to Puerto Rico and music to the ears of those in the know. It's also the sound you hear when you pull up to the Puerto Rican Museum as well, a common denominator symbolic of a community that is proud of its heritage and what they bring to the city of Chicago.
Here's what you gotta see. Next, from the 4 stars to up in the rafters, meet Chicago's official flag maker.
Every single banner hanging in the United Center was made and sewn right here by hand by our employees.
You gotta see it. It's the absolute best reporting and storytelling from Fox 32 Chicago. You gotta see it.
We have been part of every major event in the city of Chicago for over the past 100 years. We were a huge part of VJ Day. We decorated Marshall Fields at the time and covered that with hundreds and hundreds of flags. We were also part of the Queen's arrival at Buckingham Fountain. For Harold Washington, we got a call Thanksgiving morning, the day he died. And there was no way that we were going to let a major event like that happen without being there for them. So my father was putting bunting on City Hall and the city buildings on Thanksgiving Day He was photographed from behind from pretty much every single newspaper in the city of Chicago, and he always said that he had one of the most famous butts in the city of Chicago.
The 2013 Stanley Cup champion, Chicago Blackhawks.
Every single banner hanging in the United Center was made and sewn right here by hand by our employees. And we have been part of every Chicago sports dynasty over the past 100 years. We also work very closely with our police and fire departments, and we have been producing and selling the Chicago Fire and Chicago Police flags for generations. Chicago Police flag. Chicago Fire Department flag. We've been making the City of Chicago flag since our inception in 1916. So then we still got stars to go on this one too, right?
Yes, we're gonna be 4 stars.
We have Fort Dearborn, the Chicago Fire, the Columbian Exposition, and the Century of Progress. And then you got the 2 stripes representing the 2 branches of the Chicago River.
I'm doing the 3x5 City of Chicago, and I start putting it together.
A 3-foot by 5-foot City of Chicago flag is going to take approximately 30 to 45 minutes. Now that's starting with the stripes already pre-cut. So we keep our stripes ready to go. We join all of the stripes together. We finish the edges of the flag. Then we sew on the stars. And then the final step is going to be to add the heading and then the grommets. And then we have a finished flag. Extremely somber sights. Every City of Chicago flag that covers a coffin, unfortunately, was made right here as well. It's one of those things you never like to sell, you never like to see in action. We're part of the good days of the city, we're part of those dark days of the city as well. We've also been a major part of the film industry here in the city of Chicago. Everything from Backdraft. We were a major part of the filming of Batman Dark Knight here in the city of Chicago. And I did pretty much every single flag in that movie.
We've been part of the South Side and South Shore here for over 108 years. My great-grandfather started this company in 1916. The illustrious story was simple. He bought a flag from a street vendor, walked down the street, and sold it for twice what he paid for. Decided at that point, well, this must be a great idea to sell flags.
Good afternoon, WGN.
The company has been a family institution since day one, starting with my great-grandfather, passing to my grandmother, then to my father, and now to me. Someday I hope to pass it on to my daughter. You'll see our flags in every corner of the city, every corner of the state, and all across the country. You'll see us on buildings left and right. If you look up, odds are you're seeing our work. To be such a cornerstone of Chicago's history is beyond an honor. To be able to walk down the streets, to see your work, to see the impact that you've had on Chicago's culture, on Chicago's background, and Chicago's history. It's really moving to the heart when you know that you're part of something as grand as this.
The Chicago Portage stands at the west end of a 7.5-mile-long water and overland travel route across the Continental Divide, linking the St. Lawrence and Mississippi River systems. Well known to Native Americans, the route was first visited by Europeans, including explorers Marquette and Joliet more than 300 years ago. It became a major gateway for exploration and pioneer expansion to the west, and for the fur trade. This remaining protected portion of the Chicago portage route has changed very little from the time numerous missionaries, soldiers, pioneers, voyagers, and traders passed through here. In 1821, the original portage route was mapped by John Wall. In 1848, the Illinois and Michigan Canal was opened, and in 1907, the Sanitary and Shipping Canal, which is still used today. The Chicago Portage was officially designated a National Historic Site by the Department of the Interior in 1952. It's one of only 2 National Historic Sites in the state of Illinois.
That bizarre mystery of Tylenol laced with cyanide still has not been solved tonight.
Investigators say they are searching for, quote, a madman.
When you opened a bottle of Tylenol in the early 1980s, or any product for that matter, you didn't see this protective seal. Now it's the law because of what happened in the Chicago area starting on September 29th, 1982.
I think looking at this story, they're going to kind of open their eyes and say, I never knew that happened here in Chicago.
In a matter of days, the death toll mounted.
7 people have now died. A health official said, we're dealing with Russian roulette.
All the bottles of extra-strength capsules were removed Friday as part of the nationwide recall.
Do not take any Tylenol until further notice.
That was the year they canceled Halloween because of the poisoning. And everybody was afraid that their child would pick up the candies that were poisoned.
40 years later, we sat down with 2 retired Chicago FBI agents who originally worked the Tylenol case and the former Chicago special agent in charge who initiated a reinvestigation of the case in 2009. They all believe they know who did it.
I think it's solved. I can't go into that detail because it's not public.
I believe that it's solved.
I think there's sufficient evidence to go forward.
Police are looking for disgruntled employees, angry customers, anybody with a grudge against the stores or Tylenol.
Early on, there were few, if any, leads. Then this man became the focus of police. In 1984, former Chicagoan James Lewis was convicted on federal extortion charges for sending this anonymous letter to Johnson & Johnson shortly after the poisonings, demanding $1 million to stop the killings.
And the jury was out a half hour before they came in and convicted him.
Lewis spent 11 years in prison for the shakedown, but through the decades has denied being responsible for the murders.
I think the Tylenol murderer is still out there dancing in the streets.
He even reached out to federal agents following his conviction, offering to help them solve the case.
We had a profiler tell us that one of the points of the profile is that this person who might be involved in the poisoning will contact an investigator.
Roy Lane was one of the FBI's lead case agents for the Tylenol investigation. Jeremy Margolis was an assistant U.S. attorney who prosecuted Lewis on the extortion charge. They met with Lewis several times after the trial. During one of those meetings, they say Lewis gave them a sketch of how he thought the killer put the cyanide in the Tylenol capsules. So what happened to that information?
Well, the FBI's got it. It's sitting in the case files. I don't know that they'll tell you whether it was helpful or not. I'll just describe it as extremely interesting.
What's also interesting is how the FBI decided to reinvestigate the case 15 years ago.
2006, 2007, at the time, I was the public affairs director for the FBI office in Chicago, and the 25th anniversary of the poisonings was coming up, and I was contacted by a local reporter that I dealt with extensively over the years, and he had taken up this case as what he called a hobby.
So Rice arranged for a meeting at the FBI Chicago field office.
And he laid out his theory, and it was very well thought out, and he had some, I guess you would call, evidence to support it. And we thanked him for coming in and excused him, and right away Roy said that wasn't possible.
I think the quote was, "That's not the guy. We know who did it." That's what I remember.
Even though they disagreed with the reporter's suspicions, the meeting sparked a critical question.
Where is this person that we think did it? And then we ran an investigative report and found he was in jail for alleged violent crimes that he was never convicted of.
Which Grant says meant it was time to use new forensic tools to find the killer.
We had to sort of re-look at the investigation. That means recontacting 5 other police departments, including the state police, and see what everybody had. It may behoove us to take that evidence from 25 years ago and reapply it through the FBI laboratory, and that's how we started the investigation.
I think the encouraging thing is that they really look like they're really trying to close the case, and I almost got the impression that potentially, they may be close to something.
That was the hope of Jack Eliason in February 2009, when the FBI revved up its investigation into Chicago's infamous Tylenol murders. Jack's sister, Mary McFarland, was one of 7 Chicago area residents who died after taking Tylenol capsules tainted with cyanide in the fall of 1982.
Over the years, you just thought, nobody cares, it's done, they can't find anything.
It's 40 years, and we, the 3 of us here, and other task force members, believe we have enough evidence to convict a person.
Retired FBI agents Roy Lane and Ross Rice and former special agent in charge Rob Grant were instrumental in that reinvestigation taking place. In addition to searching that home in Cambridge, they also formed a task force of all the local law enforcement agencies involved in the original case to pull all the evidence together and examine it with new forensic tools.
That was a couple of years in the undertaking. Some of the evidence state police had not seen, some of the evidence the FBI had not seen. So this was, in some cases, the first time some of these agencies had seen some of the evidence that had been collected by other people.
By 2012, the federal agents believed they'd built a strong case against a suspect and brought it to 2 local state's attorneys.
The evidence in totality was presented to Anita Alvarez of Cook County and to Robert Berlin at DuPage County. They are knowledgeable and are in the possession of many of the witness statements.
At the time, the task force was attempting to do certain things and needed their cooperation.
So how did that meeting with Alvarez and Berlin end?
Ended with, we'll get back to you.
Grant retired from the FBI 10 years ago and regrets that charges were never brought.
The task force is satisfied there's enough of a case here to at least throw it to a jury and let a jury decide whether we've made the case or not.
But that's a decision only a prosecutor can make. Generally speaking, most don't like to charge a case unless they think they can win at trial.
Lewis always has suggested there was somebody else out there who did it. Our conclusion is it was Lewis who did it, period.
Anton Valukas is a former U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. He is one of 2 prosecutors who wrote a letter to the U.S. Parole Commission in 1989, asking them to deny parole for James Lewis when he was serving his prison sentence for extortion.
And we supplied them in that letter with information that we had, some of it public, others not public, which led us to the reasonable belief that Lewis was, in fact, the murderer.
Valukas says his letter included conversations Lewis had with the FBI and federal prosecutors after his conviction, when Lewis offered to help them solve the case.
And I think, Lewis, with his ego, showing you how he could do it. And we concluded it was not only how you could do it, but how he did it.
Based in part on Valukas' letter, the Parole Commission denied Lewis's parole request in 1989, concluding that he was indeed the Tylenol murderer. In 1991, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed that decision. But Valukas says whether that evidence is strong enough to win a conviction is still in question.
And my belief is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the difference.
The family members of the victims are entitled to some closure, but until there's a prosecution, until someone is charged and hopefully convicted, there really is no closure for them.
Today, Grant makes the same plea to prosecutors he did in 2012.
Give it its due attention and run the risk that you may fail, but charge this case before witnesses are gone.
We reached out to DuPage County State's Attorney Bob Berlin and former Cook County State's Attorney Anita Alvarez about that 2012 meeting. Berlin sent us a statement that says, in part, the DuPage County State's Attorney's Office has worked tirelessly with state, local, and federal law enforcement officials to bring the person or persons responsible for the Tylenol murders to justice, and that the case remains an open and active investigation. Chicago's oldest monument has been standing in a remote spot near the state border with Indiana since 1838, just 1 year after the city of Chicago was founded. The Illinois-Indiana state boundary marker is 15 feet tall and built of sandstone blocks in the shape of an obelisk. It replaced a wooden marker that had been placed by surveyors mapping out the official boundary between the two states when they entered the Union in the early 1800s. Over the years, industry grew around the marker, including Commonwealth Edison's State Line Generating Station. In 1988, ComEd led efforts that restored the marker and moved it 191 feet north of its original site, but still on the state line. In 2002, the marker became an official Chicago landmark, jammed between a power plant, power lines, railroad tracks, and a bike trail. It may not be Chicago's most beautiful monument, but it's one that, more than any other, has survived the test of time.
Thanks for reliving the best of Fox 32 Chicago with us. See you next time.